You're in tune. Well, we're gone live. It is Wednesday evening, of course, and as per normal, we're here with you, trying to stir some debate and encourage discussions on relevant issues that we believe are of interest to the Belizeans at home and those in the diaspora. And in fact, our primary objective is to attempt to bring the two closer together as best we can. Uh, of course, there are other things that we get off into, like for instance, have you been watching the playoffs, Gregory? Yeah, your mic mute. Yeah, and I get your song yet. Yeah, no, it's still muted. No song, no song. You're gonna mute. Hit. Look for the mute button. The mute button. The mute button. I'm seeing the mic with the cross line through it means that you have hit the mute on the bottom of your computer. Look at the bottom of the screen and you see these. You gotta mute the one, the stop cam, the one, the settings, etc. You're still muted. You're still muted. You're still some. When you came on, I heard you, but then you went off. Yeah, we have a number of issues we want to touch upon tonight, of course. First of all, let me offer condolences to Smokey Dan. Smokey Dan, one of the guys that was instrumental in putting the show together and whatnot, a musician up there. I believe that CY have more information on that he could share. It's always sad when you lose a loved one. He lost his mother. So we really offer condolences and hope that things will work out okay. We can't get too bitter though, because when you think about it, we've had her for years, right? And then she's had you for years. So at the end of the day, um, life is real. Life is real. Are you there, Greg?
Yes, I am. Can you hear
All
me?
right. Yeah, man, I can hear you now, loud and clear. Everything is well.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah. So I was giving condolences to Smokey Dan. I know Garrett. What Garrett Gillett? His mom passed away, and
Okay.
so
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
somebody. Um, Anyway, I was asking about the playoffs. You've been watching the playoffs.
No, my work schedule doesn't allow me to get into those things the way I used to in the past. It's
Yeah.
so unpredictable. I've been having such a heavy schedule, but I was with the Lakers and now they're suffering, right?
Out there fishing.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
in
yeah.
Cancun, I understand, vacationing. But
Yeah,
boy,
yeah.
I asked though because I'm seeing uh, um, a new player, a new sheriff in town.
Hmm.
The Pacers, and I want to try catch one of them playoff games for the finals, which will be
Yes.
between the Pacers and whoever wins in the East. Of course,
Right,
you have
right,
Boston and Miami fighting, so Boston is not one game ahead. I I I like basketball, and in fact, after just before COVID, I kind of gave up on it because I felt that it was fixed, and in fact, I was
right.
pretty sure that they would not let the Lakers get swept because there's a lot of money on these games to be
Oh
made from these
yes, yes,
games,
yes, yes,
and they
yes.
lose. A lot of people lose money. They don't lose, but they don't make the money that they would make with a game of that
Right,
magnitude. So,
right.
but it has been very entertaining, and that now they have a new guy from Serbia, a big
Yeah,
center. Uh,
yeah.
Man, the man has the complete game. I've not seen a big man play so completely. Um, since maybe the days I say of Ralph Sampson, where he came up
Okay.
and had, but this boy have even better dribbling skills and passing skills.
Oh,
So
wonderful. Okay.
yeah, man. But hey, all right. So moving on. Big news broke last week about a convoy of people coming down from America through Mexico,
Mexico. Yeah, yeah,
and they got jacked.
yeah.
And speaking of Mexico, here's Adolf Carlos Garcia. Good evening, sir. Can you hear us?
Yes, good evening. How are you? Can you hear
Wonderful.
me?
I
Yes,
can
we
Thank you
hear
so
can.
you
much.
indeed. Yeah. Uh, Adolfo, give us a little introduction. Where do you live, and what do you do?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I am so happy. I live in Mexico City
Okay.
at the moment.
Okay. What do you do? Are you Belizean or are you Mexican?
Yeah, I'm Belizean. I was born in Orange Walk Town.
Oh, okay. All
I
right.
left Belize. I left Belize in 2000 to come and live in Mexico.
Uh-huh. Have you ever lived in the States?
Yes, I live in Idaho, in Boise,
Okay.
Idaho, for three
Okay.
years. I studied in the States.
I see.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
We were talking about the convoy that got robbed going through Mexico. Did that make news in Mexico at all? Did you hear about it?
yeah, we heard about it. Every day we hear a lot of sad news around here. And yeah, it's very hard to see these kinds of things happening.
How is the situation in Mexico these days? Because we hear a lot about the cartels, and then in fact they apparently these were members of a cartel that did that. They have different territories and whatnot, and they seem to be giving the police a tough time.
Right.
Is it? Are there any is there hope in sight that maybe this will be brought under control at some point?
Well, I believe, with a lot of respect, my point of view, I think that the cartels in Mexico play an important role. Drugs is part of people's decision. I think drugs is always going to be there, but it's up to the person who takes the responsibility to take drugs. So the cartel, like a shop, like a restaurant, will always be there. And I'm not promoting drugs. I'm not promoting the cartels. But the cartels helps a lot of the people here. So in Mexico, the cartels are seen like part of the society in a good or in a bad way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the president of Mexico tries to have a like a joint venture with them, but not
Yeah.
to promote drugs. To try to handle the situation in a more way that people can understand that what we live with this situation in our life in Mexico and in the States, but it is something that cannot be controlled. It is so hard to control.
Yeah. Um, Gregory, take it for a minute. Let me see. Somebody's calling his phone like crazy. I don't know if it's important.
Okay. Um, I was just gonna say that thanks very much, Adolfo, for coming on. And I understand that pretty much you do conferencing and motivational
All right.
type speech and things like that. So maybe you'll share some of those with us, how
Like I
we
said,
could
it's fair.
kind of influence our young people, and not only our young people, but all of our citizens in Belize, and some of the work that you do in that area.
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, I am a life coach. I'm a certified life coach. I'm a certified conferencist, and I'm also a practitioner in NLP, in neuro linguistics programming. I
Okay.
started this venture about 10 years ago because I suffered a lot of violence, a lot of abuse, in Belize
Okay.
by my
Okay.
own family, by my own teacher, by my own friends, by my own fellow Belizeans, like many of us. And when I decided to study this is because I wanted to understand why people behave this way, why people are like this.
Hmm.
And I was very shocked and surprised that the reason why we behave like that is because we don't have enough intellect, enough information about ourselves, about who we are as people, my friend. And I think that that
Okay.
is what Belizeans don't have. There's a lot of people in Belize with a lot of love and respect that don't even know what are faculties of the mind. There's people
Right.
that don't even pay attention to how the mind, how the brain, how the body works. These are basic things that if we know it, my friend, if we're aware and conscious about this, we're going to think twice how we behave, how we think, how we speak.
Okay.
See
I
why?
know you
Sorry.
you always.
Great, great. Let me just say, Greg. See why? Apparently, you did not send the link to Joe, and he's trying to get in. and I hear the comedy. See what you gonna do for me now, please. Yeah, go ahead,
Thank
Gregory.
you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. I was just going to say you kind of posed the question, who are you? And I would like to get an answer how you view that, and then in the respect of Belize, um, from a national point, then we ask the question, who should we be? You know, and
Sure. Sure.
yeah. So if you go ahead.
Yes. Well, my name is Adolfo Carlos Garcia Flowers. As I told you, I was born in Orange Walk Town. I left Belize in 2000 to come and live in Mexico. Um,
Uh,
in Mexico, I have worked as a teacher, as an English teacher.
Uh-huh.
But then after I got certified as a life coach, now I am coaching companies. I'm coaching executives in companies. And about 3 weeks ago, I became an international conferencist. I'm certified.
Okay.
And this for me is something so important, for beliefs. First for me, because I believe in it, I trust in it. I have a lot of faith in this,
Mhm.
you know. But the reason why I do it is for beliefs. I mean, I'm in Mexico preparing myself.
Right.
Uh, I'm getting ready to come back to Belize very soon, but this is for Belize. I think that Belize needs this, especially the youth.
Okay. So you think in this line it will help motivate the youth in terms of laying out plans and things they can do in the future for themselves and help the country development rather than the focus on the violence that we have. And although the focus of the youth in that area is, I would think it's still a relatively small amount, but just because of the mayhem it creates, it just out proportion everything else that's going on.
Yeah,
it gets all the attention from the media for sure.
Yes, yes.
right.
So I missed some of that, Adolfo. You were
Yes.
saying that you work with the youths. Then is that it, or you work with
I
just
right here I work with everybody. I work with the youth, I work with teenagers, I work with adults, I work with senior citizens. I try to help anywhere I can, because I love people. Since I
okay?
was a kid, I have a lot of love and empathy for people. I don't like to see people suffer. I don't like to see people fighting. I don't like to see violence. I don't like to see crimes. Every time that I tune into Belize Facebook, every day I see killing like
Yeah.
never before, you
I was
know?
getting I was getting ready to say they have you in a very uncomfortable position then, because
Mhm.
you're gonna
Very.
hear, we do hear about this quite often. There's a lot of that in the world. And it might get back to what you were saying about the cartels. That's something that we have to live with. It is
Hmm.
Yeah.
there, and
Mhm.
maybe the secret is to how do we deal with it, because we have to confront it on a regular basis. No,
Yeah.
um, what are some of the ideas that you have as how we can resolve these situations that we have? What do we do?
That's a very good question. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I think that we have to invite the people. Life coaching, I am a life coach. Life coaching doesn't come here to force nobody. Life coaching doesn't tell anybody that they are wrong. Life coaching is not therapy. I am not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I am a life coach. What I do is that I inspire people and motivate people with information. However, I am not the specialist of people's life. Everybody's everybody's specialist of their own life. What I do is that I accompany people through questions that are going to make them go deeper so that they can reflect and get more conscious about how they're living. Now, I know that in Belize, there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of killings, there's a lot of abuse, there's a lot of crimes, a lot of violence, lot of abuse against women, and all of these things. I believe that just like how you guys, I know that you guys have been out there helping, and I am the same way too. I believe that whenever you know that you are chosen, and I will say this again, whenever you know that you are chosen by God, you are going to do this without waiting for people to tell you, yeah, I want it, I don't want it. This is going to be for people in Belize that want it. This is not going to be something that we're going to force people. I would like to start in the schools. You know, I would like to go to the government and give my services to the government. so that the government can have a life coach. I mean, it's so amazing today that in Mexico, being a second world country, people don't know what is life coaching. People think that life coaches are psychologists. And in Belize, if you ask a Belizean who's a life coach, they don't know either. They would think that it's a psychologist or a therapist. And for me, I think that we have to start to innovate ourselves, start to disrupt the system, and know that there's a lot of practical concepts where we can awaken our mind, awaken our soul, because many of us think that we are awakened, but we're not really awakened. When we're awakened, we're going to be like what we're doing right now. You know, we are present, we are here, we're resilient, you know, we're not going to stop this.
So, but your description is kind of vague. Could you narrow it down? You're a life coach.
Yes,
You coach people how to live.
right.
Um, but now the question would be asked: what really qualifies you for that? Is there a type of education that you take for it, or is it a calling that you believe that you just got spiritually called to do something like that?
Oh no, of course not. I would never do something like that with people's lives. I think that people's life are so important, and I would never do something like that. Like just come on a platform and just talk because I want to talk. I mean, it's okay, but for me as a Belizean, as a person who loves people and who want to do the things right, I prepared myself. I studied. I mean, life coaching is a career today. Life coaching has its own scheme of how we study, its own methodology. You know, it's called oncology, and this kind of practice is for the study of the cosmos, to know that everything in the cosmos serves a purpose, and human beings are also part of the cosmos. So whenever we study this practice, we start to notice that human beings have an important role in life. But if they're not conscious, if they're not practicing, if not they're not empowering themselves, if they're not flowing, they get stuck, and they start to have identities and beliefs that they think that they are, and they are nothing. All of these things are ego. All of these things are programs, conditions, structures that the same society of generations in the past created for people, and that is what is creating a lot of badness in the world, not just in Belize, it's worldwide, because
Uh,
people are not awakened.
yeah. Are you? Would you say your approach is religiously based? I mean, are you coming from a religious point of view, and what religion would that be? Catholic, Methodist, Anglican? Um, what religion?
Well, first of all, I believe that if we are not dedicated to a higher power, and if we don't have beliefs of a higher power, then we are just living for living, you know. I respect all the religions. My parents brought me up as a Catholic, but when I became a man, a single man, and I decided to be free, I decided to celebrate all the religions. However, I don't follow anyone in specific.
Mhm.
Life coaching is not about religion. However, I do have a strong faith in our creator, in whatever higher power people believe in. I respect that. You know, I
And
don't go about in life judging people, you know, trying to pinpoint people or trying to find ways to discredit people. I'm not that kind of person. I'm the opposite of that.
all right, well, we got that out the way. Listen, CY, can you hear me? Did you help Jose? Because Jose is trying to. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I send it to the email now, but I use that. I send it like I sent to everybody. I don't know what the problem is on his end,
yeah,
but of
yeah.
course I sent it. You know what I mean?
All right,
But
good.
give him a minute. He should be there right now.
Respect, Millie Boy. Yeah, man.
Respect.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, man. So, listen, Gregory, there's $90 million loan for another hospital. Did you see that news?
Yes,
Uh,
I saw that, and
how,
I don't have a problem with building hospital. Belize need the infrastructure. We need to make sure that as we build those infrastructure, they're properly managed, they're proper building. Because, and I tell you, I don't have a problem for it in that it's built in a higher land area where it would not be so susceptible to the hurricanes and
But,
storms
but
that
haven't we
that
been here before? Didn't we? Isn't this the same kind of NHI?
national,
We
yeah,
got an a national health
health,
service
yeah,
thing over there.
yes.
There's something about it, some sickeningly familiar. As a couple other things that are making the news now. They want to nationalize the port, I believe. Again, haven't we been here before? Don't we see that this doesn't work that way? Are we getting set up again? The
Mm,
situation with the hospital,
mm.
the workers at KHMH are saying they don't even have basic tape, hospital
Well,
tape.
that's one of the concerns, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't build another hospital. We need to figure out how to resource those spaces. The one of the problem I think I had mentioned some time ago is that the hospital or the medical is given a lot of money. I don't remember what the budget allocation is for
Healthcare.
national healthcare program, but it's a pretty hefty sum. And I think it's next up to education, if I remember correctly. And we do need to resource the existing facilities we have. But one of the problems we have had, I see, is there's a lot of drain on that system caused by the medical personnel and the way it is structured, that the doctors and such are also competing against that government facility in many ways that draws off some of the resources. And so just the most indigent people end up at the government facility. So I think there needs to be some consideration of how it works, but I don't have a problem with building a new hospital out in the Belmopan Cayo area. I think it'd probably be a good thing, but they need to think about it, how to make it work, and how and structure it, as I said, so that the existing medical private facilities doesn't bleed off the resources of that facility.
Well, I don't know how would it bleed off of the resource from there or just from the more the ones who can afford it, because of course
Well, that's one of the things. They a lot of the doctors they persuade, they say, "Oh, come over to our facility and we'll take care of you," and they don't give the same type of care at the public facility, and they entertain the people with money to go to their facility when those people are at their dire ends and probably don't have any more resource. They end up right back at the government facility. So that's one of the issue, how they bleed it off. And there are other ways that same thing happens with the pharmacies and the pharmacy and all those other things that kind of really is upsetting. And government needs to look at a way to structure those facility and to somehow come up with a better arrangement with doctors that can operate both in the private, in their own private facility and the government facility. And I know that has been a practice in Belize forever. And so it's probably going to be hard to stem it off in some ways, but there need to be guidelines how it's structured.
let me welcome Joe to the show, Joe Coe, and timely entrance because Joe, is a former minister of health.
Yes,
So he knows
yes.
a bit about that. Joe, we were talking about the $90 million loan that they just took out for the new hospital. My sentiment, of course, is have we not been here before? And did we not try this and it didn't work? What's going to make it work this time?
Well, from what I understand, Mr. Chairman, is that the government is borrowing to do more the infrastructural part, which is the building, no? And then there are some different of opinions in that the building that exists today evidently would need some upgrading. But what is unfortunate is that what is needed to input to get a better output in the health system is not necessarily the building in itself. That is the thinking. But more one, the quality of our doctors at those levels, the equipments, and the supplies. In other words, the PCPs, which is the primary care providers, for which we have throughout the country, for 4,000 to each PCP. And that is at the primary level. But the problem they are finding is more at the secondary level, because we have very little tertiary level. But the concerns, as I understand it, that you are putting in capital investment into buildings when you do not have what is so needed in terms of the human resource and supplies.
Right.
Of course, we're piling on some more money on top of our debt that we're still struggling with at this point. I was watching, and Greg, it brought back something that you had mentioned with the Chinese and their loans.
Hmm.
Many of these loans now, and I was seeing a story the other day that they're coming. A couple of countries are defaulting,
Hmm.
and that China in particular is coming home to collect, and
Yes.
they have facing major issues. No,
Hmm.
I don't know. Can we afford to go deeper in debt, and in particular for something where we already have hospitals in these locations? Could we do better at just upgrading them and stacking them with supplies, which is it's a big part of the problem now. We
Yeah.
don't have the supplies that's necessary to keep the hospitals functioning.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what the adequacy of the existing facility is. I think they need to be a understanding of what that is. Somehow they need to make an assessment. And I guess from the fact that they are building one, they have determined that the infrastructure, which is the building, is inadequate to some degree. That need to be clearly made as a case to the public, but I don't know if they'll do that because the loan looked like it already been processed. So, but that was one of the issue that someone needed to assess what were the deficiencies and why wasn't that building appropriate for remodel and upgrade. But as I said, Belize is generally on the move for development and growth and expansion and tourism and all these things. And so we do need to have proper building infrastructure. We hope that as they spend the money for it, it's a proper, well constructed building, and that it is made such flexible that it would last many years, 30, 40, 50, 60, 75 years. So we hope that it is built in a way that it will allow the upgrade over time, right?
And
And nobody could predict.
and withstand the test of time. Yeah,
Yes, yes. And
that,
nobody
that,
could predict all that, but
of
we
course.
know what a good building and what a building that's right size and is capable of be able to stand, like you said, the test of time with technology, and so
Yeah.
should probably look like out the gate. And so we should make sure that that's in part of the planning that they're developing for this building. But on the other part that Mr. Coy mentioned, the big issue that faces us right now is finding the human resource and the medical supplies to make these institution or make that the hospital a functional space, and that seems to be the challenge. I think though probably part of it is Belize has been going through a lot of trauma with the crime, and whether it is just criminal or accident on the road and stuff. And so we need to kind of find ways to address so we could alleviate some of those stresses on our facilities. And then, as I said, the other part that's paramount to me and of concern to me is the what I call the bleeding off of the resources through the private enterprise of those private hospitals and doctors being back and forth. You work 2 hours here and you work 4 hours there, and things just kind of not being in constant flux.
Fortunately, it's not all bad news because I've had some good experiences with the NHI. I would like to see it rolled out to the rest of the country like it should have been. Yeah.
Hmm.
What's your Joe? What's the situation with NHI?
Yeah. All right, good. I think I could maybe answer your first question now that you've made this opportunity to begin at the beginning. What happened is that the government is to take 100% responsibility for primary care. And the primary care was given through the PCPs, which is the primary care providers, which
Hmm.
are what we call medical doctors. 4,000 persons to a PCP. So that is the primary care side, which is the main stay of the health system, because you are dealing with the culture of prevention, and prevention begins at primary care.
Right.
Now, after you have dealt with the NHI throughout the country, where every person will have access to primary care, the issue of secondary and tertiary intervention. Let's deal with the secondary first. There are four regions. In every region, there was to be now a hospital at that level to deal with secondary care. And then at the national level, which is should have been the Kalhushna, is where the government will have the highest level of care. So the referrals will come now. First, you begin at the gatekeeper, which is the PCPs. At that PCP, for the primary care, they will decide whether they should refer you to secondary care. The secondary care is to be given now at these hospitals, one in each region. And then the one in the city will be the national referral. I think what happened in this borrowing, and why I think the opposition made some, I think, some very valid and salient concerns, is that the investment came to the House with no kind of, I would say, kind of cost benefit analysis being presented first by the experts to show clearly now why is it that we are going now to provide some secondary care and in the areas that we are providing it. And how do we allocate between the capital and the recurrent? So I think the leader of the opposition, I must give him credit for making that kind of observation. Do we have the proper amount of recurrent expenditures to match the capital? Otherwise, you're ending up with buildings which themselves will not be able to provide the kind of services for secondary care, because the primary care is being taken up through the NHI or the PCPs. So there lies the concern, which it's not the borrowing in itself, it's how do you spend what you borrow. And I think it's important, gentlemen, know that you mentioned about the debt going up, and seeing how it is very much prominent in the United States with the debt ceiling. I think it's important that we remember also that government does not die. An individual will die, but the government won't die. So you will always be indebted. Governments will always be owing. Nothing is really wrong with that in itself, providing you are bringing revenue enough. For example, we have done it before. You refinance much of your loans sometimes from lower cost borrowing, which was done with the blue bond. So there are times when you refinance loan from lower cost borrowing. I don't think the problem is so much that we are borrowing too much. The problem is what we are borrowing it for and how we are spending it.
Right.
And that to me is the acumen needed in the business sense of how you run a public sector, just like a private sector.
Yeah. It has to be accountable and it has to make
That's right.
economic sense. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, speaking of that too now, because I'm listening today to the news, the deputy prime minister, who is now standing in because the prime minister is out the country,
Right.
is saying that he believes they should take back the port of Belize and nationalize it. Um, Joe, have we not been here before?
Mhm.
Is this not a problem?
Yeah, it is because I must say that I was one of the strong advocates. Not that I am against privatization or as a principle of economic organization. No, I'm not against it. But I was against the privatization of what the government owned because of the timing. The country was not ready to take
Mhm.
some of the essential services input for its development to
Yeah.
put it into private hands as yet.
Right.
The government was better positioned to lower these important cost inputs and to allow the country to develop. And at some time down the road in the future, you can divest yourself of these assets. We did it in a very premature way. No, we have done it. To me, trying to now think about we're going to get it back, I think that is
Right.
total nonsense. The
Yeah.
reason why I'm saying it's nonsense, government has the capacity to regulate. And
Well,
it's
that's it.
yeah, the government, wherever you have in any market economy, any kind of defect, any fault, the government can regulate and adjust to the fault. My thing about it, I would not go to take back no port, but regulate to make sure
Mhm.
that are important and essential input for our development is not being abused.
But we also have to pay more attention to these contracts before we sign them, man. Before we give these things out and have like, for instance, but the port now we don't even know if the port is owned. Is it owned or is it not still in receivership? Has Ashcroft taken it over?
The port is owned, evidently it's owned, it has to be owned by somebody. What
Yeah.
Yeah,
happened
But
is, what
what
happened,
I was going to ask, Mr. Cowie, how viable is that Port of Belize right now? I mean, it doesn't seem to me to be that sort of vital money earner capability for the country as it currently is structured.
why I don't know. I
I think
believe.
as the way it is, and the study has been done on this, I can guarantee you that.
Hmm.
The study was done, and the option is whether you go to where the Belize port is today, whether you
Hmm.
go to the Commerce by port, whether you go
Right.
to where this bank is out there.
Yeah.
Those were the three options. After
Right.
some intensive study, it was agreed to put the port where it is and then bring the containerization. Open up the western sides through the coastal road so that we
Hmm.
can spread out from there. Now, the government at the time had actually closed down the Commerce by port when that was a deep water port almost already.
Right.
And then decided they will put their eggs into this one basket here in the city, except
Hmm.
that they agreed that there will be a port in Independence, but only for bananas. So when they gave the license for that, it was to be only for that. Then as it went along in a very discreet way, I must say, they begin to expand the services that could be given. Therefore, the port at the time found that it was not able to compete because too much of the freight was going down south.
Right.
Now, when the port could not have made it to pay its way through the loans, the bank moved in because it was
Right.
the bank that financed
Right.
that interest.
Right.
And when the bank moved in, it's indeed because the loan was not being paid. So what
Right.
happened now? They're moving under the contract. You didn't pay your loan, we take it over. But in the meantime, they had put it under receivership.
Hmm.
The bank, of
So
course, Belize Bank, was owned by
yeah, yeah,
Ashcroft.
yeah,
But sorry, I think I didn't finish because the question is this. No,
yeah.
this this study done by the Ashcroft Group, let's call them that,
Hmm.
is that they can make the cargo port very competitive because they have the capital to put into it. But they are tying it to the cruise ship port. In other words, for them it is mutually inclusive. You can't have one without the other,
Right.
and it's a kind of little threat. So therefore, that investment is held back on the port. That is the cargo port
Right.
until when they clear the cruise ship port. But to
Mhm.
me, it is a port that yet can become viable because the basin for the port is fairly good. It's the channel now coming in for the bigger ships.
Right.
But is this the port of Magical Belize that they're talking about? Is that the port that's tied into that, or is this another port?
No, the one that is tied
That's
into the cargo port is the same one. What's the name of it for Ashcraft Group? Not the magical port.
right.
The
That's the one.
magical, the magical one is
Is
where?
The magical one, I think, is the well, they have them by name. So I think that's the Geg one, is it? The David,
uh,
the David Geg one. I think that's what it is.
yeah.
the one at Stake Bank, not the one at Stake Bank. Another one.
So right now, to be truthful, they have the Stake Bank one. Let's call them the Stake Bank. That's the
Yeah.
first one. Then
Yeah.
they
Hmm.
have the one that Geg is leading the charge on, which is
Right.
farther up on the coastline. Then you have the one at the port here in Belize City,
Right. The Ashcroft one.
the Ashcroft one, and then you have the one way down south next to Placentia. Those are the
Where the banana? Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So there are three of them that has already been given approval. So one is functioning, two is
Hmm.
still in the pipeline, and the fourth one, which is the Ashcroft one, well, that is in contention.
Yeah. Aren't we getting too many ports now? That's
Yeah,
was one of my concern. It seems to me like two or three ports, maybe three would be a good, viable situation for Belize. Because as we, I know they say that if it's not viable, investors are not going to put their money, and so a lot of it is just dancing right now, right? Um, so, but the concern is that the environmental impact, some of them could have, some offer a worse threat to the environment than others, and I think they're making some of those studies right now to see what the impact would be on the environment, on fisheries, and just storm condition and silt being on the shores of the areas.
Mr. Morrison, I would support you 100%. The truth is that the study was done.
Okay.
It cost the government over $1 million to do that study. And what was the result of this study? The study was that at the time, and that's about 10 years ago now or more, that for every four cruise ship tourists, it was one overnight. Therefore, it felt that we should begin to try to restrict the amount of cruise ship tourists because it was impacting the environment far more than the returns we are getting on it.
Hmm.
Belize is marketing what you call a nature based product, highly fragile. It's not artificial like the one in the Bahamas, the Atlantis.
Right.
It
Right.
is it is the ecosystem. Now, they put forward the study that we should not have these cruise ship ports in the areas, like for example, the one down south should not have been there. They
Hmm.
recommended that there should be what they call the packet size ships. They only bring 800, and they are what you call the high end. And that was the
Hmm.
limit. Because when that crowd comes in, which is over 1 million now, it will destroy the very product for which the overnight tourists are giving us more for.
Hmm.
So what we are doing, we are selling with back of our ranges to somebody who are paying us only $10 when somebody there can pay us $50. That's
Hmm.
the another thing that we
Hmm.
do. And because they didn't follow the study, but you are quite right, the study did show that we shouldn't be having so many.
Right.
But now you, while you're not while you're against privatization, um, would you like Joe to see the port nationalized, taken back?
Well, let me correct. I am not against
The
privatization.
timing.
As a principle of economic organization, I believe in the free market economy. The problem with us as a developing country, as it was with the United States, with Britain, France, all of them, every one of them went through the period where the government controlled all of those high investments, low returns, and highly risky. And they held on to them until the country developed. If you and the Great Ascent, Hiberna brought it out very clear to the world. So Belize, to me, where we had the ports, the seaport, the airport, we had the telecommunication, we had water, we had electricity. Those were essential inputs to springboard with industrialization and with development. So
Hmm.
it was a premature move to privatize them.
Yeah.
And that was the concern I had. And a matter of fact, in a meeting in Guatemala, in the city, what they call that, I forget, anyhow, there was a meeting there of the Central American, all the Central American and Caribbean countries. I was there myself. The Inter American Development Bank warned the countries of the region be careful with privatization because you are too small to rush into it. And when he said too small, it was cautioning like Guatemala at the time we had 11 million. So it was
Hmm.
cautioning the least, the same Inter American Development Bank, be careful with privatization where there are natural monopolies.
Hmm.
Yeah, electricity, water, the port, they are all natural monopolies in small economies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to say something, Adolfo?
Sorry.
I see you holding up your hand. Yeah, yeah. Adolfo, you want to say something? All right, it might off there. Yeah, not Joe, but really the whole matter of the privatization. That's something I've looked at, and I wonder if because of our government, the way our government and switches from time to time, and when one comes in, they just discontinue everything what the next one is doing. There's no stability or continuity as
Yeah.
such.
Yeah.
So that might itself be the biggest enemy against government owning these entities, because
Exactly.
That's the reason for government owning them, I believe. That is the argument, that because when the government own them, it's not the government, it's the people.
That's right.
It's the people. So that's the reason for it being in people control, because then you have more stability throughout the society. Not only that, the government could then guarantee loans as they did in the past for electricity board and water department and so forth. I don't have a problem particularly with privatization as long as government owns a majority, and I mean a significant majority, not just 50%, but 50, 60%. And then the rest they could play around with giving in private hands so that people could also share in the profit. But I don't believe that private companies should own majority shares in those public institutions
I
or those.
I I don't know, because when it comes to say like telecommunications, the
Hmm.
government passed a law that they could basically eavesdrop on you and go
But
into
government
your
could eavesdrop on you anytime. That owning them
but
doesn't
by
make that
owning it,
different.
I think it does, because why is I mean, yeah, it's all good and well to say that the people own it, not government, but we know that the people can't, no part of the people can go in there and make any decision as such. It is owned by the individuals that control government, or the ones that control these entities. Don't you think that
But
putting it in
I
the hands of these individuals is a dangerous thing?
No, I don't. I know you pointing out telecommunication, but then
Yes.
that is just one in terms of the many that they have privatized. We have water. Are they going to check your water? We have electricity. Are they going to check your electricity?
Well, they
We have
can't do that with that.
well,
I mean, but
no, no. I'm just saying that argument hangs on that one principle of communication. But the truth is, government has the authority to get with private subpoena from a judge if there is cause to listen in or to have transcript of any conversation that's made, as long as there's a ruling from a judge and they suspect someone of committing some type of criminal offense. I don't think anybody's interested in listening to who somebody is sleeping with and where you were last night or something like that. And if there's a criminal activity, government always have that upper hand to get that information from whoever the source is, whether it's a government entity or a private entity operating that business operation.
before you step in, Mr. Chairman, can I bring 2 points back? One that you mentioned. Sam Morrison answers one and you answer the other one. Let me give you Mr. Morrison. The issue of privatization evidently was never intended for 100%. The government was to control. Now, the Esquivel government, I must give it credit, was moving in the right direction of privatization. He sold out 25% to British Telecom of BTL. British Telecom was a monopoly already in Britain, but we thought that they could transfer technology to Belize.
Hmm.
Therefore, when he made that move, it was a very wise move because he was going for privatization, but partial, that the
Hmm.
government will retain control. So that was a valid point indeed. It was not to say we are not going to sell no part of it. No. Let government retain the control and you sell the rest and you reinvest in other things.
Right.
And then the chairman to me made a very important point in the connection with this same thing. He talked about the term used is democratic efficiency. And the chairman is right because the problem with Belize, and I must say again, I think the Esquivel government, with the continuation of the PUP and 98, was carrying out democratic efficiency in the health system specifically. Because the diagnosis of the health system started under the UDP, and the study was done, and the PUP came in 98. That was the government I was a part of, and they continued. But when you don't have that efficiency, as the chairman rightly pointed out, in the absence of democratic efficiency, the country will be going up and down, up and down. Every time you change government, you change policies. No, no, you can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons where I hope as we move forward as a country, we could develop some type of overall planning, setting an agenda, what we want as a country, as a people, and we stop getting these movements where something seems good under one party, and then when the other party takes over, it just gets squashed, smothered, thrown out.
and the propaganda starts up, and
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. I mean,
yeah,
it really is.
yeah.
So, but let's see what happens with that. Now, how about now talking about privatization too, the Bolido,
Ha,
which was privatized. But now we're hearing kind of something about this Bolido thing, and it seems like it was making a lot of money, but we weren't knowing. In other words,
it
there's
all
word.
went into private hands. It
Yeah,
all went to
that's it.
private
So,
hands.
but how can you do it without what's the use of a public utilities commission? What a PUC does not exist to keep tabs on these things so that it does not get to that point where we
Well,
don't
I
know
don't
what
know
we're
if the
doing.
Bolito fell under that, but I do have concern about the way the contract was pushed out in the last few days of the last administration. I'm not saying that anything was done wrong because I don't know anything about it, but I do have concerns about that. And then I also have concerns about how the government of the day is trying to take it back, and I wonder what costs it will be to the people. But I do think also that their point is well made. But they're only making it on Bolida that this should be part of a public domain and control. I wish they would have expanded the same thinking to some of the other infrastructure development um, things
But
like water and sewer and the other utilities that we have.
my question though is, does governments exist for function in this way in a commercial venture as such, make uh, um, administrating these companies that's out there making money? I mean, we have governments that believes in healthcare, education, security, etc. But when it comes to like Bolido and even
Well,
telecommunications, I'm not so concerned.
well, I think a more equitable share rather than the way it went off. With the way it's structured in terms of what the government and the public take should have been different than what we're doing. We can operate this business, especially Bolido, as a private company. I don't see a problem with that. But I think that too much of the revenue was ending up in the private partnership of
And not being
Braz.
declared, we have no oversight. I mean, we
Yeah,
can't
well,
figure.
yeah,
We must find a way to
yeah.
be able to figure out
Say
what
what
is
the
going on.
take is, well,
Yeah,
all these people they operate two books.
well, that's the
Mr.
problem.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Cohen knows well about that. I'm
Well,
But
kidding.
yeah,
but
but,
was
yeah,
the computerization of it supposed to prevent that? Because it's computerized now, so they're not
Yeah,
like going to sell for PUP again.
yeah.
but Mr. Chairman, you asked the question, and I think the answer should be given.
Uh,
The lottery is regulated in this country. There is a law that regulates lottery. What happened is the license is an asset that belongs to the government that was never ever sold out. What they did indeed is to contract it out for a fee. No, there was a contract between the government and the person who was operating the group, whatever they were, that was operating the lottery. The contract was a contract I thought that was well drawn up. The problem again is the issue that it was not being complied with. What it showed that in the 10 years they received in gross revenue 128 million in 10 years. So based on that, they would have paid their business tax, they would have paid their share that they would give to the government for the use of the license, and of course they meet their operating expenses. How come that within the 2 years after the change of government, and then the audit went in and begin to inform them that they are failing in compliance with the contract, and they gave them time to remedy it. But during the period, what happened that in 2 years, 2 years, the revenue went up to about 128 million.
hmm.
Now, if in 10 years you collect 128 million, but here now, when you're going to enforce the terms and conditions of the contract, in 2 years, you reported 128 million in only 2 years.
Mhm.
So again, the issue to me is one: do you want an asset owned by the government to ever be outsourced like the international airport is? The
Right.
asset remains for the government. The asset was never sold. What the government did was outsource it. to a private sector to manage it and then get its return, just like you do with the international airport. But
I
if you are not enforcing it, and they were not,
Yeah.
they, they publish all the transgressions that were found by the investigation, and clearly they were not carrying out their audits. Nobody were enforcing the things that they were to do under the contract. So to me, again, it's not that the fault was in the contract. The fault was not an issue of whether you privatize or not. That would have been a different issue.
Compliance. Yeah.
The problem is that it was just outright raw corruption. That's what it was.
my a big concern of mine is that the Bolido are basically poor people buying those. I mean, really, the wealthy people no buy that. They really don't even have to, and they barely hope to the poor people. But the money when it, and view the talk about that kind of money there, 100 million in a couple of years. That man, you just suck the blood out of the lower class of the people's economy there, because I mean, obviously you're not paying back nearly as much as you're getting in. I don't see it as being beneficial at all to the regular people, the average Joe out there. Government is making money off a very um, un, unproductive scheme, if you will. How you say that?
Yeah. Well, they call it a regressive tax because you're taking the more from the ones that have the least to give. So it does create a problem in terms of how we structure our economy and how we deal with the people that really have the least in that regard. But Bolida is part of the ingrain of the Belizean culture. So I I'm not going to disparage it
Yeah.
in any way and say and put anything on it, but I think that as it operates, the people and the country should benefit from it heartily. You know,
Well,
it
Gregory, I remember when the argument was being held about casinos and whether they should allow casinos to operate in Belize. And the argument was, well, that we're going to take the profits, the money that we make from casinos, and put it into education. I remember that
yeah, yeah,
distinctly. That was
hmm
clear.
yeah.
Has that now has that ever been realized? Have we as education seen anything from this gambling, and are we not just promoting some sinful ways here, if you will, to put it in a mild way,
Yeah.
I think,
Well,
Mr. Chairman, Belize subscribe to the universal moral principle that syntaxes indeed should use for social services, which it meant now that under the regulations for lottery, if you notice the amendment in the House on Friday, they amended the law. And that amendment now is saying that the only person who will be allowed to manage and operate that license will have to be 100% owned or controlled by the government. If you read that properly, what I think they will be doing based on that amendment to the law, they will very likely now could set up a company, a public company, owned by the government, and then let the company operate the lottery. And then the proceeds can be earmarked. What happened with the lottery, sorry, with the casinos, and it happened with the environmental tax. When the environmental tax was introduced, it was to be earmarked for environmental purposes. Therefore, under the Finance and the Audit Reform Act, there is a provision for you to develop different funds. Like we have the big fund, the general fund, but there was to be a fund for environment. But the money, they never did set up the fund, and the money went to the consolidated fund.
yep,
Now the
yep,
same thing happened with the casino.
yeah,
The argument was that, listen, we get the church, because the church was very strongly opposed to it. And we
right.
convinced the church that, listen,
You're
we
gonna
will
have
be able to stop it. The best thing to do is to allow it but regulate it. And then it was sold on the same belief that the same tax will go for social services. The truth is, it was never done.
yeah,
Now, the argument is now, the government is making its argument and they amend the law on Friday. that now it should go towards social services again. This time, then they talk about health. So the problem, Mr. Chairman, they don't want issue of the laws, They want issue of the compliance.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
as is the case in many
yeah.
That's
instances.
that's
We never follow through with
the
doing what
problem.
is supposed to be done. We never
That's the
set up
core of the problem.
the
But
special fund, the
do we
special
uh, go ahead.
I was going to say we never special set up the special account to take that money and then account for it and then expend it in the manner it was intended.
That's right.
Do we maybe need some kind of ad hoc committee, some citizen group to keep an eye on these things and make sure that they follow through on some of these promises and that indeed, yes, the initial purpose is realized? Because apparently they can see what they want and then do what they want.
Yeah,
That's not a good way to run a
yeah.
government at all.
Well,
So
yeah, yeah.
it and speaking of the house on Friday, Joe, there was a civil assets recovery bill and a stand tabled. Um, what do you get from that? Because that to me, if they're going down that way, I would um, I would have to say that I would support that because if the entire will recover assets that's illegally gotten by people, I mean outside of the government that is illegally got, then the government should have a way of recovering that. Is that what they're doing here, or are they specifically targeting a special group or some other person?
That piece of legislation was long overdue. It was part of our commitment under both governments to deal with the corruption. But it was also done to because of the anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism act, the money laundering. So the law itself will be dealing with civil assets recovery and unexplained wealth. So in essence, what they are doing is that if you have assets by which the course of conduct cannot be explained that it was done legitimately and legally, then they will be able to seize that asset. But they can use the act to me. I had a look at it today. It's something that will take some time to really get into it.
Properly digest, no?
Yeah, because it's not a very long act. It's about 90 odd sections or about 80 odd pages. But what happened to me is to draw the line between the civil asset recovery and the unexplained wealth. Because unexplained wealth, we never need a law. It was there before under the Income Tax Act, what they call the visible wealth. So the tax department had the authority that once they could find from their own investigation, which they have a right to access all the information citizens have regarding to their income under the law, and if they sense from the visible wealth, yeah, a lot of buildings going up, it is said it belongs to John Brown or sorry, whatever the name is. Now the tax department have the right now, as they did before, for you to begin to explain where you get those wealth from.
Did before where, Joe? With who?
Because it was already under the Income Tax Act.
No,
The
it was
building
there,
act.
but has it ever been done?
I don't think it ever has.
That's what I'm saying. It was not being done. Barrow, in coming into office in 2008, that was one of the promise that he will begin to go after visible wealth,
Mm.
Uh,
but he never did. Now the law now is making it clear that they will deal with civil asset recovery, but they are also will be going after unexplained wealth, which is the same visible wealth you can explain.
Yeah, yeah.
but
But I was going to say one of the thing that happens when you start doing these type of things is then a lot of those assets, particularly cash, goes offshore. So
you can't track it.
that's where it gets really tricky. You know, instead of building a building in Belize, you send cash to Cayman,
But
put
you
in the
know what
bank there. You know,
I
so
find a big problem I find is that the way the government operates. See, when the government comes in, all these entities that are supposed to be oversight, they're supposed to be keeping the corruption in check, are manned by people appointed by the very government that they're supposed to watch.
That's
So
the
they're
problem.
beholden. They have allegiance to them. That they don't want to do nothing for rock that boat because then they're gonna suffer if they're put out of a job. So I don't know. Is there anything that we can do to prevent this? Is there something in place to ensure that this doesn't continue?
More democratization of these processes and setting up structures so that they're not all appointed by the prime minister, but by subcommittees of the Senate or House of Representative, and the people they are drawn from is more broader than just political
Political
choices.
cronies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I'll never forget when Mayor Wagner had made the comment that, and the barbarians are at the gate. They win, but the barbarians are at the gate. In other
Uh-huh.
words, the people that are expecting to get rewarded are there, and you have
Mhm.
to. Dean Barrow had also made a comment in a former prime minister forum that they had at Bliss that he
Mhm.
believes the spoil system will always be there, and in fact went further to justify that maybe that it should be there. I don't know, but it seems quite counterproductive. It doesn't seem like it helps the advancement of the country at all. Uh, uh,
Corruption will always be there, you know. Corruption will, it's the level of corruption that becomes so distracting for development. Corruption, you can't stop, you nowhere you could exclude corruption.
yeah, but
People,
certainly you could put a guy infrastructure in place to catch it when it happens. For
that's
instance,
correct. That's
take
correct.
when
That's
take when
correct.
this fellow was in charge of BTL. What's his name? He passed away actually after Jules' father, Vasquez.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
he
Hmm.
apparently went on some spending sprees on different occasions with the company credit card and spent a
Hmm.
lot of money. Is there at no point does a red flag go up, a bell rings, somebody says, "Wait a minute, this not seem right here. Is there nobody there? Is there nothing in
He's the
place?"
chairman. He's the chairman. Who inside that organization is going to report on him? Unless they feel some grievance and they're on the way out and such.
Well, unless we have a whistleblowers act in place that protects people
Mm,
that comes up, and if you come up with an allegation like that and it is proven, then you should get protection. Your tenure should be secure, no?
well, yeah, people are not that brave. Nowhere.
Kind of
No,
like,
when I say that, I don't mean there isn't a single person. I'm saying a majority of people or a significant portion of people will not be that brave in a society as lean as Belize, where everybody knows everybody, everybody is interconnected, related. You're not going to find that as unless somebody feels some type of grievance or some type of
well,
issue with some individual.
I'm not going to be so pessimistic on that one. I would
But
think
then why do you need a whistleblower act to do it if it's the right thing to do? You
but
just
no,
do it.
no, no,
You
but
just
yeah,
do it.
no,
Just do
no,
it and suffer the consequences.
no, come
That's
on,
what I'm
come
saying.
on,
No,
Gregory,
well
come on.
that's exactly the point. That's
No,
exactly the
no,
point.
no. That's not a good point. No, I think there should be protection for a person who wants to do the right thing. You see, in other
I'm
words,
not
that you
saying no to that, but I'm saying why do you have to have some benefit to do the right thing if it is the right thing you're doing and that's the interest of the country? I mean, if you're a good person in whatever you could do, you could find a job somewhere else. But as I
uh,
said, the country is so small, people feel penalized by it and they're not going to do it. That
yeah,
was my point.
yeah. I don't. I think they would. They will. Let me shift gears here because the minister from down south, Rodwell Ferguson, I believe he is a minister of sports, but he made an interesting comment suggesting that the citrus industry is on the way out. And in fact, deceased. He used the word deceased. In other words, suggesting that citrus is gone and people will have to plant coconuts and they're going into that and whatnot anyway. Um, I don't know. Do you have an opinion on that? Do you agree with him? Do you have reason to think that or should we maybe allow it to go the way it is going? I mean, certainly there have been good years and bad years, but it has been a mainstay. As Channel 7 suggested, a lifeline for a bloodline for the people down south, no?
Well, I don't know why he would say that, whether it's just the land is probably not suited for it or whether there's some other cause. I know at some point there was a agreement or a
Yeah,
plan by
yeah.
Tropicana to kind of develop the citrus industry in Belize. So it seems to me that in the far look of it, the land resource is there and able to do it, and maybe they're just not competitive enough in Belize in the quantity that they're doing that it makes it profitable. And if it is not, then we should need to find some other resource that we could have some competitive advantage in. So, I don't have a problem with that in particular.
Joe, what do you think? Was he speaking out of turn or just predicting some event for the future?
Well, when I heard it first, it was more true like the rumor mill, I must call it. I felt indeed that it was one of those guffin politics, what you call the inconvenient truth. I realized that when I gone and I looked at what he said, I know him personally.
Mhm.
And he did say, well, yeah, that's finished. It's moribund. Citrus is done. Well, he grew up in the citrus belt, no? In
Yeah.
fact, he used to work for one of the biggest citrus growers in the country, Citrus and Cattle. Now, when I read the response coming from the Citrus Growers Association, who admitted that they had a problem, and one, he spoke of climate change. Two, he spoke of the long drought. And three, he spoke of migrant labor. He said those were the things that were affecting them. But they're confident that they can make a comeback with government support. Now, remember, there was a time when they had peaked at about 8 million boxes a year, 8 to 9 million.
Right.
Then they gone down to as low as 1 million, especially just after the pandemic. I
And the
think,
greening. I remember I had the citrus greening
right,
that destroyed
I,
a lot of
I believe that Rodwell may be a prophet in his own way, and maybe he's seeing that maybe that time to look at an alternative. Because, one, when the citrus growers responded to say climate change, who right now could expect that there will be any reversal of climate change until when the big powers decide to do something? So you may be very well reach the point where irrigation, if it was irrigation, obviously they can address irrigation. It was any case of where some kind of disease keep hitting it, which they do, you can address that. The issue of the labor, the migrant labor, the government did address that for them. So that was one of their problems, but that was addressed with the permits that were allowed for them to come in. But when you are dealing with this climate change, gentlemen, we have to ask yourself indeed, I mean, is it one of those products that we may never be able to make it ever competitive again?
how is climate change affecting the oranges? If you have proper irrigation, we still have the rainy season. It's about to rain as we speak. We still have more rain in Belize than dry. And how would the climate change affect citrus in
Well,
Belize?
I wouldn't be able to speak authoritatively on it, but it was he, the CGA guys, who responded to the minister and said climate change. So he must know, of course, more than us because they are the ones. The CGA Association is the one that used to do all the research, used to provide the what you call the nurseries. They were the ones that organized the cane farmers. In fact, we used to work for them one time as the editor for that CGA crowd. No, that he was the one who said it. But we know for a fact that climate change is beginning to have its toll, especially on us, the smaller countries. So if he said that it's climate change, then to me, he should have tried to say, well, how we address that. Can we, can we, you see, he mentioned three things. The migration was one. They never had the labor. Then that was remedied because the government came in and it allowed to make them have permits. So that addressed that, but it came in pretty late. But when you are dealing with the issue and you said climate change, I'd like them to hear know why is it. In fact, the truth about it, the only reason why they were able to make some degree of comeback is was because of government financing. So how much does the government will have to continue to be giving support to really keep you out of the accident? I mean, you want to live in the accident tent. I don't know if that
Well,
get them out of the accident tent again.
Right.
I heard somewhere that citrus doesn't pay a tax. Are we aware of that? That they, like the citrus farmers do not pay a tax on the money that they make.
Now, they were all subject to the business tax, but it wasn't anything much.
Yeah.
Because it was on the you see what happened, the business tax not another story for another. When they gone from tax and profit and then gone to tax and gross revenue, which was a very nonsensical thing. It makes no sense. It means now they just pay on what their revenue is. But it's not the tax at all.
One of the questions I have though, Mr. Cow, is on climate change. Is it just because we don't have water reserve? Why couldn't we build some type of lakes and things like that to capture some of the water so that we can disperse it more evenly during the period when we do have droughts or when they need water from not necessarily always drought, but when they just need water, so they have it more
You mean
accessible.
another dam?
No, I'm not thinking of a dam. I'm thinking of a lake or something like that where you could collect water. The dam is one issue, but that's not what I'm talking about here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
thinking
that
of totally diverting it to a lake or some space where it could be held and reserve and then release into the agricultural infrastructure as needed.
that kind of like is what a dam does, I believe.
Well,
Um,
dam kind of does that, but that's
yeah,
not.
because you have
Uh,
a wide space that it becomes like a lake.
Well,
But I'm saying,
dam restricts a river. I'm thinking of a separate area where you could preserve this water. They do that in California and different places where they have lakes. They build lakes and they divert some of the water into that, sunken hole there, and then they let it out as they need it in times, more slowly, so it just doesn't run off all out into the Caribbean Sea.
yeah, all right. But the question is for you, Joe. Can they do that to save the industry and to combat climate change?
Um, what I know of the irrigation side of it is that there is no doubt that we have not fortunately reached the point where there is a shortage of water generally, but there can be a shortage of access to water. That is the difference.
Mhm.
The Taiwanese brought to us a kind of cultivation where we were able to we could reduce the land by 25%. Well, they have 100 acres through an irrigation system that they introduced to Belize. You can produce from 25 acres instead of 100, the same amount. But it was done through irrigation. And the irrigation wasn't very expensive, from I remember. It was the access to water. So you were to build your farms where you would be able to access water because you would need a pump. The pump will you'll get the water from, you have to go and begin to do cultivation where you are near to these lost, to rivers and so. And then you get the water through the pump. The pump was only costing, everything would have cost about 8,000 for 25 acres. What you need was a pump and you need PVC pipes.
Mhm.
And they show you how to lay out the PVC pipes and how to bore them and where so that they can irrigate.
Mhm.
And with that, it proved, and they did it with rice, that what you were producing on 100 acres, you can do it on 25 acres. You know what was the problem, Mr. Chairman?
Hmm.
I was talking with one of the guys. Kai was there at the demonstration. I said, "You have 100 acres." I said, "Why don't you do what the Taiwanese are suggesting?" He said, "Mr. Coy," he said, "But we don't got that kind of money."
And
No,
you're talking $8,000.
$8,000.
the point is that he has 100 acres.
So what I say, you could borrow money out for that, can't you?
He thought he might 8,000 for each 25 acres. I said, no, you won't need that.
I
You will
think
take
small, man. I
you will
think
take
small.
25 acres and leave that. Leave it. Abandon that for right now. Take out 25 acres, find 8,000,
Yeah.
and you can do it.
Joe, is there a chord? Is there a chord in the citrus industry? You hear names like Jenkins and Canton and them boys, them big boys from down there. Are they on the one page? Is there harmony or like everything else, discord?
But there has been discord.
Yeah, I've heard
There
enough of
was.
that because it seems like we're always fighting that believes. Everybody that protests. You have the key in industry can't get it together because every year they got problem. The Christian Workers Union is again tied up in some entanglement with the Port of Authority. There's always some kind of and Greg will tell me as he usually does. This has to be expected, and I expect that from you, Gregory. But I don't know, man. There must be somewhere we can resolve things, in particular in these vital industries that so many people rely on for their daily bread.
The only time you get full agreement with business and labor is if business open their book fully to labor, and they'll never do that. So this contention will always exist. And I could only talk to the accountant to see if there's any other way.
I would say this, and I may be doing it at the risk of. But anyhow, maybe not everybody. We work for them for many years. Citrus, cane farmers, the marine industry, cooperatives. We used to do a lot of work, Korean Associates. We covered every cooperative, every industry in this country. I myself had a problem in advising the cane farmers and citrus growers. Gentlemen, there's a reality to the world. If you have 50 small citrus growers scattered over the place, you could never compete with one person, meaning a legal person or a natural person. We have that amount of acres all in one. The economies of scale that comes from
Mm,
one, the cultivation, two, the harvesting, three, the transportation.
mhm.
The problem that it was difficult for them to come together, maybe through a cooperative, reorganize themselves, and bring the economies of scale. It's not easy to have so
Right.
many acres scattered all over the place. The reality of sparseness is evident at the administrative level of government. When the British took 6 districts, just to quickly point that out, it was done for administrative tidiness, but what it caused, it left behind a heavy administrative cost in this country. You know, to have that time maybe 100,000 people scattered over 8,000 miles,
Mm,
where you have to provide education, healthcare, security all over the sparse population of this country was
I,
one of the retarding effect of development. We were
right.
too sparse, scattered. And
Yeah.
the same apply in farming and these other things. The economies are scale.
should
Right.
we do what the U.S. is doing and open the border to let the immigrants come in? Because they're having their own problems with that. I mean,
Well,
Oh,
I
that,
would
that
do I would do exactly what the German economists recommended in the Great Ascent. Do exactly what the United States did. Do exactly what Europe did. France and other developed countries do the same thing like them. Get the government lead the way for now. Do not privatize. Government invest. When you invest, you could borrow. Government can borrow more than the private sector can die. Government cannot die.
but Joe, you're forgetting instability, man, and you're
But
forgetting the lack of continuity. With our government change, there have to be people in place with security of tenure, people who will know that they're not going anywhere once they do what they need to do without having to serve their masters. No, what do you think?
you know, my answer to that, I think I will quote from Martin Luther King.
Uh,
Martin Luther King was right. when they robbed the man, Martin Luther King said they want to blame the person that was robbed because he possession of wealth precipitated it. You know, one of a big problem, Mr. Chairman?
Uh-huh.
Every time you try to find what you think is a solution to a problem, we go right back to the failures of human beings, our people. Bertrand Russell, yes, he was an atheist, but he was a very philanthropic person. He cited two things. He said the moral deficit and the intellectual deficit. He said the intellectual deficit we are addressing. He said, but man still cannot deal with the issue of the moral deficit. Until when we, as a country, can deal with this moral deficit, the care system you put in place will never work.
According to Gregory, and I wish you never take out the headphone. Put it back on, Gregory. According
Oh,
to Gregory, it will never work.
yes.
It will waste your time
That's,
because it
that's
is what it is.
don't, Gregory, please do not
I'm
go
not,
down.
I'm not
Don't,
misquoting you, Greg.
don't go into
Well,
the winter of despair, Greg. Stay in the
uh,
spring of hope.
Greg has given up all hope, boy. The human beings, he's like, talk show host say human beings are not good people. They're not. Uh,
I don't generally believe that. I believe that we're most susceptible to do good than to do bad.
I agree.
I think everybody's born good actually, and we just go bad for influence and environment that we're raised in. I really I don't believe it.
You don't think some of them have bad DNA?
Why I find it tough to believe that. I that is not.
Uh,
Um,
I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
I know, and I
Yeah,
want loaded situation, but
yeah.
let talk about loaded, Joe. Let me ask you a loaded question. Now you're a PUP, you're a former minister of this government, or the PUP government. How what kind of report card did you give to them to this point? They've been in office what 2 years, 3 years.
Mhm.
Uh,
Two and a
what,
half, two and a
what,
half.
what, what, where do you see some strong points and some weak points?
I see some strong points in the areas of, and I will run the risk of maybe leaving out, but I would say this: I must give credit to some improvements I'm seeing in education. I think that, especially the Minister of State, supporting a long-standing minister, Mr. Francis from Tinker. To me, they have come to see now where education must be developed in terms of where the country should want to go. And I sense the minister coming out quite frequently with some changes in terms of curriculum, changes in terms of how we're going to carry education to the young people. And I believe that I see some improvements in there. So I must give credit, and education is so important to us. I must say I see some improvement in the Ministry of Lands. And sometimes, Mr. Chairman, we have to judge ourselves not so much by the depth we come from, but by the height that we achieve.
Hmm.
So I would not want to judge this government against what the previous government was. Otherwise, they will get very high marks.
Yes, indeed.
So I will judge them not by that. I will judge them by the benchmark I set for government in terms of what I think they should be doing. So I see some improvements in the Ministry of Lands. I see in education. I see some things in the Ministry of Finance. I see some improvement, yes, in the budgeting area. I believe where the weakness remains is that one, we cannot continue to run a public sector of that magnitude. It is too costly. We are overburdened.
You mean
So,
the wage bill, too many employees for the
one,
government?
one, too many employees. We have to right size the public sector. Two, we need to go back to meritocracy. You will earn your position in the public sector. Three, we have to go back to the permanency of the public sector. We need to draw the line clearly between those who will be public officers by virtue of being permanent and those who will be politically appointed. We need to make the laws for that. So I think the greatest weakness, which is veteran, and that is what had happened in the past, the public sector had become administratively and politically dysfunctional. If we don't address the public sector and make it what it should be, because that is the instrument for government to achieve its manifesto commitment, and that to me is the weakness.
Well, given government the way we have a government, another weakness would have to be a non-existent opposition. And I'm looking at Shine Barrow and almost like how Philip Golson was the only opposition voice in the House. Can we trust any government to operate the way it should without an opposition holding their feet to the fire?
I always believe that in democracy and in everything in our lives, it's always good to have an opposition. But when I say an opposition, I don't mean one that will be opposing, as some would say, just for the sake of opposing.
Which is what usually happens. Yes, I agree.
The
Yeah.
mistake we are making. No. I have heard, and I must give credit, there's only 5 of them in that house against 26. But I must give credit to some of the things I hear from the opposition today. I think they come forward with some very good constructive criticism. I take the point that housing, as the leader of the opposition was speaking at the closing on the public matter, he cited housing as a human right under the United Nations Convention and laws. And that is showed where perhaps the way we may be addressing housing right now is when we build these amount of houses, which nowhere near the 10,000. But we need to ask ourselves, is it really meeting the demands for housing? One, how do you determine who will build the houses? Two, how do you determine who will get the houses? And how, in the end, your policy will be able to be sustainable to hopefully, if not achieve 10,000, maybe 5,000. He gave the criticism towards the borrowing, which again was, I think, a legitimate criticism. You have to match how to match capital with recurrent. Otherwise, you could end up with the capital being not as effective and efficient. That to me was a very good point raised, and we should take note of those things. So I believe strongly, Mr. Chairman, that I prefer to see a strong opposition in any democracy. And this brings us to a point which I don't want to open now. But let's not forget a point that was raised by Dr. Young, Harold Young, in a show we had 2 weeks ago when he raised proportional representation. I think we need to give some more discussion and serious thought to proportional representation, given the political culture of the country at this time.
Well, we certainly need a redistricting. Is that in the works? We're running unconstitutionally now. Let me put it that way.
Right.
And
Uh,
you are
uh,
quite right. It's a fact.
because
Yeah.
and we keep hearing talk of it, but we see no effort towards rectifying that situation, and it's blatantly unconstitutional. I mean, it's written right there, and it
Okay?
makes a lot of sense.
It does.
So,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, speaking of proportional representation, that in itself, I think, is very important. That people, because that in itself would make sure that the government we get is elected by the people, as opposed
Right.
to certain lopsided
Right.
constituents have been
That the government is truly
the-
representative of the
of
votes
all the
cast.
people, all the
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you spoke of housing too, and you raised a very good question. I mean, who do we give them to? Because a lot of people who want these houses, and you wonder, because I've seen houses given to people. I in 2 years that I think that one old house, dirty. They're not doing nothing to try and improve on it. Should maybe these houses that are built by government be built in a way that they can be improved upon easily? I mean, like that one first step towards more things,
Yeah,
and then
ownership. And
yeah,
that's what they used to do in the past. If you look at how Belmopan was built, And then even before that, how Cinderella Town was built, where all those government built so many houses and then gave it to most of the time at that period, it was like civil servants that were entitled to make those purchases.
Yeah.
And similarly in Belmopan. So it was much better. And sometimes I look at what probably the Holy Redeemer Credit Union is doing in housing, and I wonder if there couldn't be a partnership that exists between the way these housing are being constructed and given out to people, rather than the government doing what they're doing in terms of housing, and a plan like that wouldn't work. I know some people are going to criticize it that it's family or whatever, but if it's set up in a way that any government could do it, or any other organization that's willing to go out and make that risk, that those become the housing that then could be passed on to people. You see what I'm saying?
Mr. Morrison, go to the head of the class.
Ah, ah,
I
I'm
totally,
sorry. I'm
no, I
sorry.
agree with
I'm,
you. You
yeah.
made a very good point. You see, if you understand how the public service under the British developed, with all the atrocities that they created against mankind with slavery, they left behind one of the best public service. The reason why I'm saying this right now, they knew that human beings, by their nature, has to be partisan. They knew it. How can you go against you that want a representative? These people voted for you. They campaigned with you. They were out there fighting with you. You win the election. It's hard for you as a human being not to want to reward them. So what you need to do, you need to insulate yourself from that temptation which must come. And when you do that, which is what the public service should be about, if you say, well, listen, we will make sure that you have access to affordable capital, low cost, and then the government, if it so wish, can subsidize, but the government will not decide who will get it.
Hmm.
What the government will do is say, all right, we have a national bank or we have the credit unions.
Hmm.
Let the credit unions decide who will get it.
Right.
Rather than you decide, well, guess what, boy, I have to solve my crony because that's the way you want to do. It's
Hmm.
only natural for
Hmm.
you to want to do it. So
Yeah.
what you need to do is to create ways where institutionally you can reduce the bipartisan uh, the biases in your bipartisan thinking because it's natural in us.
Yeah.
That is why they created these different bodies within the public sector. Let's take the permanent secretary. These are the things we need to be discussing. The permanent secretary loyalty is to the citizen, not to the minister. So when the permanent secretary tell the minister, listen, you can't spend no more because this is the law or no appropriation. When it tell the public officers who don't have to comply with the finance and the audit reform act, doesn't the minister have to tell them to do that? No. The auditor general literally can't audit the public accounts because they are not complying with it. So why are they not complying with it? Because they have nobody to tell them they have to comply with, and the ministers don't do it. These are the things, gentlemen, that we have to begin to seriously highlight, and not highlight it as a PUP or a UDP. Highlight
Hmm.
it as a citizen of this country.
Yes.
There have been too much violations of the laws, too much indifference, too much contempt for our laws by our very elected officials. And that housing thing, we need to be careful with it indeed.
Yeah.
speaking of going to the head of the class, okay, I need to be at the head of the class because I think that's the most important comment you have made, not only today, but in a long time. That we have to stop looking from the view of a PUP or a UDP or even an unconnected P. We need to look at this as citizens of this country. We want the country to get better for everybody. I mean, if
Hmm.
all boats aren't lifted by this tide, I mean, and almost like they sit down in the boat and say, "Aha, your side the sink, my side not the sink," but that the whole boat went down.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think, and a very important point. I wish more people would get that point and take it seriously. Let us look at this, and even listen. Let's put it in the realm of the focus of our show, the diaspora and the Belizeans at home. We have to stop looking at this as, oh, either the diaspora Belizean, you are the local Belizean, but we are all Belizeans. They're one country. You know what I'm saying? And until we have this in front of us as the goal to make this country a better place, we almost a waste of time, don't you think?
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. And stop this thing about south side and north side.
Yeah.
That again is dividing us, not only geographically, but socially. And in our minds, we tend to let people believe that the good people live on north side and the bad people live on south. That's how some of the people are beginning to see us.
Yeah.
Well,
But you know, that's a thinking that's not just a new origin. You know, it's manifesting itself probably because we have embedded it in us so long. But I remember growing up that hearing that and having some inklings of it, even then back in 1970s. So, but now it has really manifested itself,
Gregory,
and we, yeah, go ahead.
Gregory, back in Africa, there were tribes. They
Hmm.
lived in different areas, so that and that's where I thought you were going because and yes, it's been there around, and I don't think it's such a bad thing. But then let us maybe have teams, a team representing the south side and one representing the north side. Let's make a competition out of it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I
yeah.
agree.
Man's innate
Nature, yeah, nature is
nature
competition.
just compete
Yes,
with
yes,
and you create that, but you have to create positive competition as
right.
opposed to the negative ones.
Like
I
the
would,
NBA. Like the
yeah,
NBA, we got the West and East.
yeah,
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
really, they're not like you to say, oh,
But yeah,
one
good
better
idea.
than the other,
Good
or,
Hmm.
idea, Mr. Chairman.
we blame one for the problems that we're having.
Right, right.
Because you have look at the now. So you got the jungle, you got Majestic Alley.
Hmm.
Majestic Alley
Hmm.
started the whole gang problem with the wild bunch and them boys out there. They shot the clock and a
Right.
crew.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you kind of like, I mean, but you're not gonna get away from the fact that we are divided by the Halova Creek, and that in fact, and now funny thing because you take a ride up on boat pan the Halova Creek, and you look at the north side and you look at the south side of that creek, boy, you
Hmm.
will see some interesting differences. And
Yes,
there's
yes.
always like the develop and cleaner side
Hmm.
is on the north side. And
Hmm.
as you go along, you'll see that on the south side the whole way, there's a lot of just
The, the, the,
dilapidated
yeah.
houses,
The South
car.
Side have long been neglected, and one of the problems I always had with the last administration was that they never, even though they maintain their vast amount of representation from there, they never seem to have got the inkling of moving forward in reaching some consensus for addressing development on the south side.
Yeah, that one sad state of affairs. And I think though it comes again from two sides because the people themselves have got to develop a will to want to live better, to do better. And in fact, let's look at this because we could go to the sentiment I've heard a lot that the poverty, mixing poverty with crime, that the poverty causes crime. But I don't think so. I think that if you can be poor and still live, have a standard of life that is not dragging you down into the dumps, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Cleanliness, of course, is said is next to godliness. And cleanliness, I believe, that is start of lifting yourself out of the dungeons. Maybe we need to pay more focus on that, put more attention in that area. Clean up the city, make things make and I wonder if maybe they don't clean up the north side more than the south side. So
And Mr. Chairman, you know
Well, you
what?
know, taxpayer, the people that are paying the taxes usually get the most services, right?
You know, Mr. Chairman, we are touching on a very sensitive, maybe unconsciously, but for me, very
Right.
consciously.
Yeah.
When we talk about this issue with North and South Side and what is happening, as Mr. Morris said, the development of underdevelopment of the South Side. I would describe it as such, no? And let me say this to you, gentlemen. I'm speaking now from I come from the River bottom, right?
Hmm.
Every human being I believe should have a philosophical anchor. He must got something we believe in, something worthy of making him a human being. Collectively, a movement, whether it be the church or a political party, should have a philosophical anchor. Growing up in the People's United Party, there was a philosophical anchor. To me, what I sense is happening today, Mr. Chairman, we need to get that conversation going. Do we believe today that there is any ideological differences in partisan politics, or there's only differences in the sense of who will get the power and how they will distribute the cheese?
Mm-hmm.
That's a question that should be answered. In other words, if you are a member of a party or movement and you believe in what that movement is advocating in terms of its philosophy, you should be able to go speak out against any leaders who are deviating from that philosophy.
Without being victimized.
Well, the thing about it, it's not saying that you will do it without being victimized.
Yeah.
But if you are, on which I agree with you, then to me, we don't have any constitutional or natural rights. In other words, the freedom of speech is a mockery. The freedom of association is a mockery. Because if I have free speech and when I speak out, I'm victimized, what is more blatant in terms of violating the Constitution than what is evidently happening to us? That when we speak out against what is there, even if you happen to support the government of the day, you will be victimized. Now, how do we remedy this moral deficit? Those are the questions, Mr. Chairman. We need to begin to debate these issues and talk about them.
I think the people, we ourselves, we the people, have to understand the role we have to play in it, the power in our hands. It is said that the power of the people is bigger than the people in power. And I believe that, but you need to get, there needs to be a unifying force. You need in strength, in unity there's strength, no? So I think we really have to find some way to get enough people that understand this and have some sort of movement. I don't know if you have to be in the political arena or just again like a ad hoc thing out there where your voices are raised in the areas that where things need to be exposed. There's a lot going on that's wrong, and if corrected, there's a lot that could go on that's right and more beneficial to people. If we leave it as it is, we're not going to get nowhere. So I think that's one of the big reasons why we need to be on a show like this, why we need to continue speaking every week. I want to apologize to the fellow Adolfo because I was hoping he would get engaged, and I tried to bring him in, but he doesn't seem like the topics that were being discussed were along the line um, the life coaching thing that he did. You missed him, Joe. Was he on when you were you or you wasn't in? He wasn't. You missed his introduction. You were a bit late coming in, but he was talking about his job as a life coach and what he did and whatnot. Um, and I don't know that the political discussion coincided with the goals that he had and his forte, if you will.
Yeah,
So,
but I must apologize because I was late in getting in. Simple, I
no,
couldn't.
no, yeah, obviously that is understandable.
But
That's
what
you.
happened, I really didn't sure what was the gentleman speaking on. But I think I saw him as if though you were inviting him and calling him. It looked like he was putting up his hand to speak, which I
Yeah,
would
yeah. Remember, yeah.
have
So
liked to hear him speak because I think that is a very good topic. You know, that they talk about the coaching, that would have been very interesting.
yeah, well, hopefully he'll come back because he's on with us every week, even when he's not involved.
He's
He's
coaching in sports, Mr. Chairman. In sports.
no, no.
You are saying coaching in
Life,
or life coaching.
yeah.
Oh, that would be good, man, certainly.
Yeah, but we know you need that because
Yeah.
I, I'm just kidding, really. I've I'm an interesting profession, and I see more and more people going into it now. I don't know how do you prepare for such a profession, and he seems to have an anchor, a religious anchor. He obviously believes in a controlling force, no, a superior force. I don't know how you get it across though, without philosophy, psychology, and all the other tools available there to tap into a person's psyche. How do you coach a person about life? And I was trying to get him to give us that, but he wasn't quite clear on it. And maybe you come bring him back at another time and see what we could squeeze out of him, no?
I
Right?
think the issue of coaching one about life, you either acquire it maybe firstly through academic training, like doing the human behavioral science stuff, like sociology, etc. And a good
Sociology.
amount of it too you had acquired from your own personal experience. If you, for example, I would say that I'm going back to the time in which we were growing up, young boys and girls, that we had parents that made sure we go to church. We
Right.
had parents that made sure we go to school. We had
Do your
parents
homework.
that made sure we do our homework, we do the chores at home, whatever we need to do. So to me, that kind of life coaching is beginning right from the cradle, right in your own environment, your family environment. And as you move up and you decided, no, I want to get more advanced training, how to interact and help other people, then you maybe go through the academic world to get more training because there's a vast amount of things that are documented and written from these very various behavioral disciplines. But I do believe it's an area that is of great importance to us. Essential, I would say.
Well, you made a very important comment there too, in that the homes where it starts from, and I don't know if parents nowadays are taking the task of raising children as seriously as it was taken before. They basically just have the child hand them a computer, one one tablet, no, and then left hand there all day, and that's what he's doing. We don't talk to our children anymore. Back in our days, we had a whole lot of sayings that meant a lot. Not kill the goose to lay the golden egg. Um, there's so many of them that I should be able to bring up more than I'm bringing up, but there are many little pitty sayings that help to guide us on the road to that better life that we are seeking to live, being better citizens, being better persons, being contributors and good family members. I don't know that enough focus is being placed on it in the homes in these days. People are just too busy making a living. You remember that for a long time the mothers were home anchoring the situation there, and fathers would be the breadwinners go out and buy it. Now you got the fathers and the mothers both having to work and very little time to spend in raising the children.
Mr. Chairman, 2 days ago I had a healthy, long conversation with a psychologist. And that point you raised was one of the points that person raised. It was quite noticeable in our family life. One, the traditional family was the father works and the mother stay at home, look
Right.
after the children, do the chores at home. Time went by, it changed. Both of them want to go to work because they want to live a higher standard. But at
Right.
the same time, what was coming into play was the technology with television. Now, it has been proven that when you watch television, it takes away from your creativity. Like when you read. When you read a book, you have to create the images from the reading. But when you are watching television, it removes, it challenges your creativity.
You don't have to think so much.
Right?
Yeah, it's
Very
right there.
exactly.
And
Many of the, many of
that
the
is
children
yeah,
are given
that
the tablet to look
yeah.
at something just to keep them quiet. So
That is knock against on TikTok now too. You know
yes,
that you don't need to be put no effort into it. It laid right out. You don't even have to think. So and that kind of like if you don't use it, you lose it. So
then
if
you
you don't,
mentioned another good point which was raised in this discussion. What about those what we call mostly single mothers? Can we have more single mothers than single fathers? No? So most of our single mothers are the mothers who are fathering the children. Now, when you have that single mother fathering the children, and the mother itself would need to be parenting because he never get a chance. So what happened to him? How can he really shape a child's mind and behavior at an early age? So that vicious cycle we were discussing and how to break the vicious cycle. But you bring very two good points. That's what this cycle is exciting.
but I've always felt that a woman cannot raise a boy to be a man, and a man cannot raise a girl to be a woman. You need to know what it entails for you to pass on the necessary steps towards becoming that. And I really think and that's not saying that mothers have not raised sons, but the ideal thing is for a man to have a hand in that and guide that child to becoming a man, a true man. It might be part of the problems that we're having right now. I don't know.
So
Greg, you still with us, Greg? Yeah, I see you're muted there. You're muted, Greg. Maybe that's why we're not hearing from you. You have your mic off. I don't know if it go on, but it's been off for a while. And um, yeah, Joe. While Greg works that out, but certainly um, we're there on position in our development as a nation where we need to look at these issues and see what we can do to correct these problems.
so in other words, you are saying that God never created the opposite sex just to procreate.
There we go.
But you are saying it that it's not just for the purpose of procreating.
I would hope not. I
You're
mean,
thinking it that the man's job as created by God cannot be done by a woman, and the woman's job as created by God cannot be done by a man.
I would think that would be natural to suggest.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
and
think it's a good point to have for a discussion because I can't believe he just made us opposite sex to procreate.
yeah.
There must be some other thing behind that. I do believe that.
Well, we have roles. We have roles to play, man. We do
well,
have roles to play.
well, G. Mike, if you look at the past in terms of the traditional family, I think there is overwhelming evidence to show that 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 generation had more moral values. They had more sense of values. And as we begin to transform how we interact within the family, I think you begin to see the negative consequences of it. When the mother will have to play the role of the breadwinner, the father to play the role of the breadwinner, or the father sometimes isn't around or the mother isn't there. I do believe that it must be beyond just procreation. It must be that the father has a role to play that the mother cannot play. And the mother has a role to play that the father cannot play. So I think there might be some truth to that.
And the children are going to come up anyway, but we're going to have major problems, Joe. We can't help but have major problems because if we're not following the blueprint for life.
So
Uh,
that's how the way you said it. If we were not created just for the purpose of procreating, which to me is difficult to believe that that's what God did.
yeah.
He couldn't have made us just opposite sex for the purpose of creating.
Well, I'm sure you enjoy the union.
Yes, but in the union, the enjoyment should not have been single sexual interaction.
Yeah, it comes with responsibilities, I believe.
So
Yeah.
to me, I believe that the gender difference was not only for the sake of procreating. The man must have had a role that God intended him to play.
That one conversation we'll carry on again. We've reached the end of our time for this. Today. It is And Gregory seems to have bowed out. He had some problems earlier with his computer anyway. Joe, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you very much for being on again with us tonight. And the young man Adolfo Garcia, I want to apologize. He did not get fully engaged in the conversation, but at another time we can talk more about what he's about. No, we'll see everybody again next week, same time, same place. CY, take this away. CY. Let me again offer condolences to Smokey Dan. Garrett Gillett, his mom passed away. So again, that's always a tough time to go through, particularly if you're close. And that again, Joe, shows that when you're fully involved, then the hour of separation is tougher to deal with. Smokey Dan, take care, bro. Respect every time and condolences. See why we're gone. Good night, Joe.
Good night.